Hello everybody, I'm Chris. I'd like to welcome you back to this series on Blueprint for Composition. In this particular segment, we're going to review by doing a little practice as to how to identify the difference between phrases and clauses. So these two terms, phrases and clauses, were the focus of the first two segments of this installment on identifying independent clauses versus phrases. So in the last segment, I described in detail how to identify an independent clause or how to identify what is known as a simple sentence and how to distinguish that from a phrase. Now, in the previous installment, I also described the meaning of the word fragment. So on some of these tests that I described in the previous video, there are sections on the test where people are asked to identify sentence fragments. So a fragment would be basically an incomplete thought, which is set aside as its own separate sentence. So that is an error of grammar. If you have an incomplete thought which is set aside or set up as a complete sentence with a period at the end. So what we're going to do in this particular section of the video here is I have 5 groups of words or expressions on the board. We're going to analyze each one of these 5 and we're going to identify which one of them they are. So for example, it says label each expression as either independent clause, phrase, or fragment. So we're going to look at each one separately and we're going to label it and then we're going to explain why it fits into that category. So let's begin. The first expression, and you will notice I left out all of the capital letters and all punctuation just so that it will not give anything away. So in the first example, it says, I ate fish for supper. So, is it an independent clause, is it a phrase, or is it a fragment? I ate fish for supper. So, I will give you a few moments to think about that, and then we'll reveal what it is. So, I ate fish for supper. If you think this is an independent clause, you would be right. So, I will label that I-C. This is an independent clause. It has a subject, I, it has a verb, ate, and it expresses a complete idea. So therefore, I could put a period at the end of this sentence right there, and it would be a complete sentence. So, in the previous section of this series, we said an independent clause is also equal to what? One independent clause, or a sentence that is made up of one independent clause, is called what? It is called a simple sentence. So here's an example of a simple sentence. Number 2, in the morning, fishing for fun. Take a moment to think about that. Is it an independent clause? Is it a phrase? Or is it a fragment? In the morning, fishing for fun. Now, as a matter of fact, this one is not a complete sentence. It is not a complete idea, so we can rule out independent clause. So the question is it a phrase or a fragment? Now, it does contain a phrase, and in the previous installment of this series, we talked about prepositional phrases, and in particular, prepositional phrase of time and prepositional phrases of location. In this case, the group of words does contain a prepositional phrase. In the morning. That's a prepositional phrase of time. However, fishing for fun is not a complete thought. It's not a complete idea. We have no subject and no verb here. So yes, it does have a phrase, but the whole group of words up here we have to consider as a whole is not a phrase. So if we try to put this into a separate sentence, and if I put a capital letter I here, and I put a period over here, is it a complete thought? In the morning fishing for fun? No. So therefore, F for fragment. Okay, so this will be a problem if I put a capital here and I put a period over there, because the whole group of words lacks a subject and a verb. So I could potentially use the word fishing for a subject, but I don't have any word that shows action. So incomplete thought set aside as a sentence is called a fragment. So number 2, fragment. Let's look at number 3. Under the sofa, we found some coins. Take a moment to think about that. Independent clause, phrase, or fragment. Under the sofa, we found some coins. So you need to ask yourselves, does it have all the complete components to classify as a complete idea? So in this case, we look for what? We look for where to start. When we analyze a sentence, what I like to do, I always like to find the subject, and I always like to find the verb first, because the whole sentence revolves around the subject and the verb. Everything else in the sentence, beside the subject and verb, is extra information. It's additional detail. So I want to look for the subject and verb first to establish if it is a complete sentence, in fact. So, do I find a subject and verb in this sentence? Yes, I do. Right here. We and found. Okay? That's my subject. We. It's a subject pronoun. What do I see after it? I see a verb, found. In the past tense, the verb find. So that's an action verb. So I have here, we found. What did we find? We found some coins. So there's my object for that verb. So that's an object. We talked about that earlier. And what about this part over here, under the sofa? Well, that's a prepositional phrase of location. Starts with under, which is a location preposition. And under what? Under the sofa. So there's my prepositional object right there, the word sofa. So all of this has the necessary parts to classify as a complete idea. Subject, verb. Does it have a complete idea? Yes. So if you said, or if you thought that this was an independent clause, you would be right. It is an independent clause. I mentioned in the previous installment that you can use these prepositional phrases in different areas or different locations of a sentence, and under the sofa could be placed in the front of the sentence. It is not, generally commonly going to be placed there. We found some coins under the sofa would be much more common, but it does not make the sentence incorrect or incomplete to put it here. So, in some cases we can rearrange, or we can, reorder a sentence with different phrases here and there. So this one does not make the sentence incorrect, nor does it make it a fragment or an incomplete idea. So all of this would classify as an independent clause. Now, 4. The stars at night. What do you think this would be? Independent clause, phrase, or fragment? The stars at night. So again, my recommendation would be this. First step, step 1. Identify subjects and verbs. Do we see anything in here that we could use as a subject? Possibly, yes, the word stars. All right, stars are nouns, things. So we can use stars as a subject. And then we have a problem. There's no verb. There's no word that shows action in this sentence. So, do I need a verb to have a complete sentence? Yes. So this one, number 4, cannot be an independent clause. So it's either a phrase or a fragment. Do we have a phrase in it? Yes, we do. The phrase is right here, at night. So this starts with a preposition and has an object. The word night is an object for the preposition at. And it is a noun. Night is an object. Noun. There's one very important rule that you have to remember about how sentences are constructed and organized, and the relationship between words and sentences. So here is an object, the word night, of this preposition at. So this is a prepositional phrase. It is a very important rule to remember that if a word is being used as an object, either as an object of a verb, as in the word coins over here, or the object of a preposition, as in this one here, or the word sofa here, it cannot be a subject at the same time. So it is either an object or not. It is either a subject or not. It cannot be a subject and an object at the same time, and it cannot be an object and a subject at the same time, which is basically saying the same thing. So the stars at night is not a complete idea, number 1, because we can't have an idea be complete if it doesn't have a verb. So therefore, if you said F for fragment, you would be correct, because this is not a complete idea. So we put the noun there, we put the prepositional phrase there, but we don't have a verb to complete the thought. So definitely fragment. All right, let's look at the last one. On the table next to the bed in his house. Take a moment to think about that. Independent clause, phrase, or fragment. On the table next to the bed in his house. Do we see any words that can be used as subjects? Possibly. Well, again, ask yourself the question, what kinds of words can be subjects? We talked about in the previous videos, nouns can be subjects. In this sentence, we do have, in this example, we do have a couple of examples of nouns. So, what are the nouns in this sentence? We have the noun table, we have the noun bed, and we have the noun house. So you might think, table, bed, house. All nouns, all potential subjects. But you would be wrong to think that. Because there's a problem if you want to think about it that way. We have to understand the other parts of these expressions. So we have the word on, we have the word next to, and we have the word in. These three words, on, next to, and in, are prepositions. So I just said a moment ago, if there is a preposition, it must be followed by an object. And in this case, object nouns, table, bed, house. These are all object nouns of prepositions. So therefore, I just said, an object cannot be a subject. So these cannot be subjects. That's one problem if you want to think about them as potential subjects. They cannot be objects and subjects at the same time. So therefore, we have to discount that and say, okay, those are not subjects, so where are my subjects? Well, there are no subjects. And therefore, it cannot be an independent clause. And another reason why it can't be an independent clause is because there's no verb. There's no verb in all of this list of things. So all of these, one prepositional phrase, one prepositional phrase, one prepositional phrase. So if you said phrase, that would be correct. Because we have here, what we have here is basically a string of prepositional phrases. Now, technically speaking, if you said, all right, well, that makes sense, but if I put a capital here and I put a period over here, wouldn't that be a fragment? Yes, it would be a fragment. So the general point I'm trying to illustrate with this particular example is that when you string phrases together, it does not constitute a sentence. So all of these things together cannot be a sentence. But what I'm trying to illustrate here these are prepositional phrases, so that you cannot confuse the prepositional phrase and its object with subjects. Okay? So if I was doing this exercise, that is how I would go about analyzing the reasons for my choices. 1, independent clause or simple sentence. 2, in the morning fishing for fun, fragment. 3, under the sofa we found some coins, independent clause or simple sentence. The stars at night, fragment. On the table next to the bed, in his house. These are all phrases. So, next time we'll get into a little bit more detail about a different grammatical topic and how it relates to the sentence composition process. So what we're going to talk about next time are the use of conjunctions and how to join sentence clauses together to form different types of sentences, and we'll also identify things such as compound subjects and compound verbs. So that'll be in the next segment. Hopefully this was instructive and illustrative and helpful for you. I would like to thank you for watching, and we'll see you again very soon.